Good afternoon, everybody. It is welcome to the second meeting of the Reapportionment Task Force. It's Thursday, May 20th, and it's 3:30. Clerk, could you please call the roll?
Ford.
Here.
Raz.
Here.
Gums.
Here.
Kenyon.
Here.
Martin.
Here.
Sanchez.
Here.
Shepro. Strathman. Gately.
Here.
Meyer. Arnold. Shelkey. Afif.
Here.
Hernandez.
Here.
Pedersen.
Here.
Rivera. Walter. Thank you.
May I please have a motion and a second to approve the April 29th, 2021 minutes? Gums. Thank you.
Just seconds.
Are there any thoughts or changes or edits to these minutes? Hearing none, seeing none, please, clerk, please call the roll.
Ford.
Yes.
Raz.
Yes.
Gums.
Yes.
Kenyon.
Yes.
Martin.
Martin, yes.
Sanchez.
Yes.
Shepro. Strathman.
Yes.
Thank you.
Minutes are approved. Is there any public comment? Is there any public comment online? Seeing none, we can go to our new and unfinished business. So the last few weeks, we have been very busy putting together, where you're going to see some new maps, some new data, as well as putting together the agenda for our town halls, and all of which we're going to be discussing today. But before we begin and bring Josina and Phil online to talk to you about the work that they have done, I'd like to do a little past history. I think it's kind of nice to know where we've been, so we know where we're going. So, kind of a little history. So, if I can have your liberty. Let's see. Can we have the 2011 district map
Want that?
up on the screen?
Sure. Actually, you want to stop sharing, Kelly? I'll pull that up real quick.
Roger, are you going to be working it?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna pull some slides because that was a little different. Let's see, share. Give me 1 second. Okay. So.
Excellent. Thank you. So this is a map that we are working with currently, and this is our current map, which is our map.
Correct.
One that was approved and drawn by the county board in 2011. Can I have the next slide?
Sure.
Now, what we're doing is we're honing in, because remember we talked about we're going to be working in sections, not in quadrants, but more or less in thirds. So this is the area of Sleepy Hollow, Carpentersville, Algonquin, East and West Dundee, all the way down through Elgin into South Elgin. And what I'd like to call your attention to are how the districts have changed and just the highlighting of this. So we're going to take a look at this and then we're going to go forward again. This is current data based on the 2011 map. And we're going to be focusing as we go further on this section over here. This is going to be the part of the discussion today. So what I want to show you is how, if you take a look at the population, you can kind of grid down there, take a look at the yellow, and you're going to see continued population growth as well as minority district growth through there. For instance, Monica Silva is got almost little half of her district is Hispanic right now. Anita, almost 2/3 of her district is Hispanic right now. Deb Allen, about half of her district, more than half of her district is minority. Cheryl, you take a look at yours, about the same, more than half. And Jarrett Sanchez, probably again, probably looking maybe about 70% Hispanic. And we've actually have the percentages with that as well. Could we have the next map, please? The next slide, I should say. Now we're looking at section is down here now. Other population growth, where the other population growth has come. And you can, again, take a look, we just went through that, of how these districts with the population is. And this is current population based on the 2011 map. Could I have the next one, please? Now here comes the history. Now you can see that here are the districts, and there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 districts that represent a high proportion of Hispanic voters in 2010. Ron, if you take a look at yours, you have about 10,000 Hispanics, 3,000 African Americans, and Caucasian in the minority. If you take a look at Myrna's, and take a look at hers, almost 19,000 is minority, 2,000 white. So that's what we would call a packed district. You take a 90%.
Yes,
90%.
that's what I would say too.
That's an authentic packed district. So if we were to take a look at that, I would say, well, that actually could be broken up and distributed. Could I have the next slide, please? Mr. Shepherd, welcome. Okay, so here we are now based on actual data, and we can take a look at again with the yellow. You can start seeing now with this one, the same map. You can see how it has started to grow. So now we've got Jarrett's, we've got Cheryl's, we've got Deb's, we've got Michelle, we've got Monica, Nita, Dale, and Myrna. Take a look again. Myrna's still packed. Dale Berman's okay, about 50%. Anita Lewis is packed. Monica Lewis looks pretty equitable. Michelle Gums, equitable. Deb Allen. She definitely has a majority of her district is Hispanic. Cheryl, majority of your district is Hispanic. And Jarrett, absolutely, majority of districts Hispanic. So we've got, again, do the count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 districts right now that could be considered fully minority districts, minority-based districts. Maps, minority. Now here's a map that was commissioned by the county board in 2011. From what I've heard, this was never brought forward to you for consideration. It was the MALDEF map. And Roger, or can you just tell me exactly what the...
It's the Mexican-American Legal Defense. I think that, I'm not sure of the F, but They were working on redistricting and different issues related to equity.
Fund.
Okay, now this map we were able to find as well as the backup data that went with it, and that was shared with Jacina and Phil. And you come up and take a look at the maps. What we're going to see is that this was their proposal in 2011 on how the minority district should be drawn. If you come up and take a good look at it later on, please feel free. The maps are going to be here for you to study. You're going to find that there's changes here and here. Elgin and Aurora. The maps up in the Algonquin Carpentersville area are pretty much the same.
Madam Chairman?
Yes.
It's the Mexican American Legal Defense and Educational Fund.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for that clarity. I'm bringing this to your attention because this is a good baseline for us that we can use to see what was drawn by truly an independent map back in 2011, how it was redrawn through these maps, map that was approved by the board, and the new map that we're looking at. So it's just a historical reference point, so you have another point of view on it. The next slide, please.
These are basically zooming in on the northeast and southeast corners of the county using the MALDEF version. So the next was the data from MALDEF.
Now, what we found interesting about this is, let's do the count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. They've drawn 9 minority districts through here. And we had talked previously about 8 minority districts. So it's
I have a question. So this is
yes.
what this is the 11 map. That's that data there?
Exactly.
Okay.
So this is what this data looked like. So a little bit of past history to see where we're going right now. Are there any questions on any of this information? No? All right, I'd like to turn it over now to Jacina and Phil, and they can present what they have drawn up and what the new maps look like. Or I'm going to stop back. What the data shows. It's not a map yet, it's a data show, what the data is showing.
Thank you, Chair. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Great. Phil, was there anything that you wanted to say before I present the draft map?
No, go ahead, Jacina, and I'll add in if I think I need to.
All right, well, first I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Josina Morita. I'm a mapper, I'm a voting rights mapper. I helped work on voting rights maps 10 years ago. Phil and I actually worked together 10 years ago on the state map. And I particularly focus on drawing voting rights maps and respecting communities of interest and integrating community input through the process. So I look forward to working with all of you over the next few months through this process. I'm not sure how much you guys have already gone through just redistricting 101, which is a very abbreviated version, right? There are 3 kind of fundamental rules that we follow when we draw these maps. The first is equal population, right, which is fundamental to one person, one vote, and respecting that there shouldn't be deviations really beyond plus or minus 5% between the different districts to ensure one person, one vote. The second is compact and contiguous. That district should be relatively compact in shape, and they must be contiguous, meaning they cannot have disconnected portions of the district. And the third being the Federal Voting Rights Act, which is the districts that are going to be looking at today, which Section 2 of the Federal Voting Rights Act that applies to Illinois fundamentally says that if you can draw an effective majority minority district that you must. And, you know, here in Kane County, we're largely looking at that in the context of Latino population and the general.
Josina.
Did we lose her? I think she muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Sorry, where did I cut off?
You're talking about the voting. You were speaking about
The
the
Voting
Voting
Rights
Rights
Act?
Act. Yes.
So section 2 that applies to Illinois and to King County, I'm sorry?
No, go ahead.
Background.
Okay.
Yeah.
That if you can draw effective majority minority districts that you must, that largely applies to the Latino populations in Kane County. And the general kind of vicinity of population that constitutes an effective majority minority Latino district is between 60 and 65% Latino. And so that's what we'll be looking at today, is primarily the districts that have large enough Latino populations to make up 60 to 65% of districts. And we'll go to the next slide. So in the draft map that we've drawn based off of the 2015-2019 American Community Survey estimate data, we drew 8 Latino districts that can make up 60 or more % of a district. So you'll see that there are 8 districts here with less than 5% deviations that are compact and contiguous, and at least 60% Hispanic population. And I'll go over those districts. You can go to the next slide. So this is the first district up in the Carpentersville area. This is a very high population Latino district. It's actually one of our higher percentage Latino districts, partly because it's not quite enough population to draw 2 districts. So you could draw a higher population, over 70% Latino district in this area. The next slide. Next, we go to Elgin, where you can draw 2 majority Latino districts. And we tried to respect as much as possible the general cores of the pre-existing districts and how we drew these 2 districts. Go to the next slide. And then you can draw 5 additional districts. Again, we are working off 2015-2019 estimate data. So depending on if, when, and how we can use the 2020 data, it could be possible to draw an additional Latino district in this area, depending how the actual 2020 census data is in comparison to the 2015-2019 estimate data. But based on the 2015-2019 estimate data, we can soundly draw 5 Latino districts in this area that kind of go into the core of Aurora and then spread out a little bit to the surrounding area. So those are the 8 potential Latino voting rights districts that are possible, and happy to hand it over to Phil or answer any questions.
Are there any questions?
Can I follow up on a couple things that Josina said, and then you can, I think it might be helpful, just kind of set a little background of some of it. As the chair said, you know, we've seen a MALDEF map from 10 years ago. A couple things you need to kind of look at when you look at those numbers. First of all, it's out of 26 districts, because that, I think, was your prior board size. So the districts were a little smaller, so it was a little easier to draw those. The other thing, if you really look at those numbers of the ones that are highlighted, there's probably 6 of what I would call effective Latino districts. One of them, a couple of them were right around the 50% level. And instead, if you see what Josina's done here is, sorry, the lowest she has are 63% Hispanic, and that's total population, right, Josina? But it is, I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
okay.
yes.
Sorry. So you got 63%, which is in that range that we think that we have seen historically as effective. for a Hispanic to, or Latino or Hispanic to win an election. 63, 65 is kind of the minimum. And you might say, why is that? I think we talked about it a little bit, but kind of as a refresher, at least on the 2010 census data in your area, the voting age population, which is really your huge number, you got to have over 50%, and I think significantly over 50% for them to be effective, is you're like, so if you're L1, most likely you're voting, or let's go to L2, your voting age population for L2 there is probably closer to 57, 58%. You say, why is that? Why does it lower? Both historically, Hispanics, African Americans have younger families, have larger families than the white population is these days. So the voting age population, which is, you know, everybody 18 and over who can actually vote, those are the only people that can affect an election. They're actually lower historically for Hispanics and Blacks. The other concern you have with Hispanics is, as we know, I was doing a calculation the other day. I think only about 1% of the Black population in Illinois is non-citizens. And I'm sure it's probably pretty close for the white population too. However, the Hispanic population has the number changes, but it's depending on where you are, but it's a significant portion when you look at what we call CVAP, Citizens Voting Age Population, because not all Hispanics are citizens, as we know. Not all of anything's citizen, but a larger percentage of Hispanics are non-citizens than whites and African Americans. So we're trying to protect. So you kind of have to give a greater buffer. If you look at the Latino population in the MALDEF map from 2011 that MALDEF prepared, you will see that, and you'll kind of see where I talk about those two districts. One's at 37, one's at 50. You look at District 8, that was at 37%, probably not pretty close, really not an effective Hispanic district. And if you look at 20, that's at 50%. Again, not really an effective Hispanic district for someone to win. But the ones that MALDEF was focusing on, if you see, are really this 65, 66 minimum, 68, all the way up to 81. And the chair is correct. District 1 is probably packed. I think MALDEF was making a decision at that point to strengthen a district, because if it's, I don't remember what District 1 is, but my recollection is it's up in the Northeast, where you can really, as Josina showed you, you can really only draw one Hispanic district. So that's, there's just not enough population to draw two. The green areas, which are the percent Latino, if you can see the darker green to the west, that's a huge area. My guess is that that's not a heavily populated area. It just looks bigger. So there's just not a lot you can do in that area except to stay compact is to put a fair amount of Latinos together. So that's just, you know, if you pushed, and we want to give you all the information and then we'll give you the advice. You know, given the current data, Josina can draw 9. In fact, she's done it, but the numbers get really, really tight. Josina, what was your lows? Were like low 50s, right? Total pop?
They were right at 5 positive and negative 5% deviation, and they were still closer to 60, 62%, particularly right. Those in the Aurora area.
That's right. And then what she had to do to get there was all those districts were pretty much at a -4, -5% deviation. So they were light. And given our, I think it's a little, and I think Josina agrees, she was doing this kind of as an exercise. I think you have some risk if you draw all your Latino districts smaller than all your white districts, right? 2 is, we also know the problem we're going to have if we do end up drawing with ACS data. We've talked ad nauseum about the lack of possible accuracy of those districts, and you're kind of almost asking for districts to be for districts that are going to end up having to be greater than 10% deviation overall between the highest and the smallest. So Josina and I talked. This is the concept that came out of it. From a demographic standpoint, from a compactness standpoint, I think she's done a wonderful job. Political standpoint, you know, those are decisions for you to look at, but I think this map is a really good indication of what kind of things can be done, the number of Latino districts you can provide. Unfortunately, the African-American population is not compact enough, not in a small enough area to really draw an African-American district. So those are my thoughts on what Josina has provided, and I'll turn it over to her or the chair or whoever for questions.
Happy to take any additional questions. And I know this is the first step in the process, so I know people also may need some time to really study and digest these. So,
yes, Mr. Martin.
This is John Martin. Is there a grid of any kind that shows these proposed districts against the districts that already exist, just so we could get a sense of what the changes in the boundaries are and you know how it's going to impact individual members of the board?
I can provide that. I also provided an updated set of data of what the 2019 American Community Survey estimate data looked like on the existing county district boundaries. I think previously you had those based off of ESRI enhanced data, and I wanted to make sure you were able to compare apples to apples. So you have an updated chart of 2019 data on the existing districts, and then I'd be happy to draw comparison boundary images for you all to study.
Well, and I had a second question. We've got this huge area up in the northwest part of the county that's going to what I'm going to call the open space, everything away from the Fox River. It's going to impact, I would think, certainly the districts in the west part of the county, but it's going to have to draw geography from someplace to equalize populations, is it not? I mean, I look at every other district is going to have to grow, and that's going to have to shrink. So I guess I'm trying to envision.
Mr. Martin, yeah, you're absolutely correct. We've kind of messed around up in that northeast corner a little bit by, you know, you can do some of that bringing 21 out because 21 was underpopulated in your current map and pushing that stuff out. I think it ends up at the end of the day, maybe, you know, you kind of push from both ends. 9 obviously is going to look different. 15 may shade up into some of 9, and the district before 15 may shade up a little into that. There's going to be some significant changes. I think what Josina was asked first to do was, hey, let's look at section 2. Tell us how many you can draw. Tell us how it affects. The reality of it is, I think all you're seeing here with the section 2 districts is, since they're pretty much at the equal population number, really close at this point, and those will be smoothed out even probably further. What you're seeing is this can't be done, at least, and those districts that Josina drew have, for the most part, taken additional population in versus what you originally had in the district. So each district, you know, we all know there's probably 2 districts that are heavily overpopulated. 9 is, you know, I think it's 9 is very overpopulated or whatever it is. And then 15 and 18, those are the 3 districts that are going to have to lose, and 9 obviously the most. It can be done, you know, and I don't think it's a huge problem. I do know, as far as these districts, as Josina said, she kept the core. She also, none of your incumbents are paired together. That is one of the things that I know she focused on and I've asked about. So I guess this is a good first start. We're not suggesting that there's not a lot more work to be done, Mr. Martin, but this takes us a good beginning, I guess is the best way to put it.
Thank you.
When you mentioned, Phil, paired together, what do you mean by that?
Well, one of the things we talked about, I can't remember if it was the task force or the county board. I think it was the county board. one of our goals is not to start pitting incumbents against each other where it's not necessary.
Okay.
Right. The goal here would be to get a board map. At least my goal would be to get a board map that has 24 votes on it.
Absolutely.
24 yeses, I should say. Obviously, if you start pairing incumbents, that becomes a lot harder to do. And as I've said to the board, I think maybe to hear, I'm getting my meetings confused, so I apologize. And looking at incumbents is a traditional redistricting principle. You can look and draw to make sure that you're not pitting incumbents against each other. And that's one of the things that I think our marching orders are. And to the extent we can, our goal is to provide you a map that does that, as long as it does not interfere with what we call other traditional redistricting principles, such as compactness, equal population, and heavily important Section 2 districts. And as we see, we can draw these Section 2 districts in a way that makes a lot of sense, and at the same time does not pair incumbents, for lack of a better word. And I apologize for not being there today. It appears that we believe there's going to be a map come out of the legislature in the next day, and I'm in Springfield, so I couldn't make it back. My apologies.
As an update on Springfield, I did hear that there may be some movement, and we'll know about that definitely next week regarding the reapportionment language. So knock on wood with that. So they are working on it. Yeah, Mr. Sanchez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Josina, do you have those maps that you can send to all of us? And do you have them in a format where we can zoom in on the details and see the actual streets that are selected down to that level of detail?
I can send these to you as PDFs or JPEGs. They're not interactive in that way, but if there are particular areas that you would like me to provide more zoomed in maps on particular portions of specific districts that show streets, I'm happy to provide those as well.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Ford.
Yes. The L's, one, does that represent the same number as District 1 and so on?
They're regions.
No, they're not matched with any existing district numbers. They're L for Latino, and then they're just numbered in terms of the number of districts. So they're not, they do not correspond to existing district numbers or what the future district numbers will be.
Okay, then going back to Mr. Martin's comment about not being able to compare them to what is existing with the current maps, because we are comparing a 26 board map to a 24 as far as getting history from it. So that's, I don't know exactly where that's really relevant of that. So another part is I'm not clear on the portion of African Americans in the district where I'm at with the change. And then my other thing is that I think we're missing an opportunity to take some areas and give them their own representation instead of having them broken up from other areas. And I've heard that from the community as a complaint.
So I can just speak to the introduction of the MALDEF map. It is just a historical record. That's what it's used for, because that is the map that was defined showing minority districts. So I thought that that was important as just a comparison.
No, I understand that. But when we're talking about the organization that wrote that map, trying to come up with the districts, I can't remember the name of it.
So,
I just said.
Madam Chair, just
yes.
For point of clarification, if you look at this table, which is what MALDEF is doing, the yellow map has 24 board districts. The chart has 26 for the board seats or districts, but number 9 and number 19 were eliminated. They're zeroed out. So this represents 24 districts in the population getting ready for the 2011 map drawing. So this was 2011 population, 2011's 24 board districts divided across the population. So it's not 26. They are doing it based on 24. The yellow map has 24 districts on it. if you look to the west, you'll see the 4 districts that were created out west. And we didn't have that in the 2001 version. So it is the 24 district map.
Okay.
Oh, I see. I got it.
Yes, just to clarify that, I think
I appreciate
Mr.
that. Thank you.
Lucan said it was 26 or somewhere. I heard
Yeah,
26.
I was
it's-
obviously wrong. Yeah.
It's 24. They did blank out the data for the 2 districts that were deleted or removed, just so you're aware of that. If you
9
look in
and
this
17,
table, you'll see
9
them.
and 19.
They're gone. Yeah.
So, Mr. Ford, going, I think, to your 3rd request, you are requesting if a African-American district can be drawn. Is that?
I'm saying that there's an African-American district that works as it is. So I'm curious to see what the changes are with that.
So a point of clarification when we talk about voting rights districts, right? We're talking about when we refer to voting rights districts, we refer based off of the population of the voters, not by the race of the elected official. And so, right, because the Voting Rights Act doesn't talk about electing people of color, it talks about protecting the rights of voters of color. And so it is not possible to draw a majority Black district. I tried. But what I did do, to the point what I was talking about with communities of interest, is to look at the African-American populations within these areas and make sure that they were kept together as much as possible within the Latino districts. So you see that there are districts that have 14% African-American, 10% African-American, and that was done in an attempt to keep the African-American communities within these districts together so that they had some unity within those districts. But I'm happy to, again, provide more zoomed in comparative maps and take any community input on how to do that to ensure that communities of interest are protected within this process, even if they're not under the Federal Voting Rights Act.
Does that answer your question?
It does, but I know for a fact that's not what the community gonna want to hear. So.
Yeah, Mr. Ford, I think it's kind of to follow up on what Josina said. You're obviously in a district that today is, looking at the numbers, approximately 50% Latino and let's say 1.5 or about 15% African American. One of the things we look at is how do Latino, as Josina said, is this an effective opportunity for Latinos to elect a candidate of their choice? When I first looked at these numbers, and there's certain others besides you, but one thing pointed out at me in a district like yours, that at least you appear, from what I can tell, looking at these numbers, you're the candidate of choice of the Hispanic community in that area, it appears. So that's kind of how we look at it. And, you know, you're obviously, as an African-American gentleman, winning a district that only has 15% Latino, if that, maybe 13, or 13% African-American. You're winning that district. And I guess it will be, I think it'd be interesting, and what Mr. Martin asked for, and I think you asked for earlier, is when Josina is able to overlay, let's call it the core of the districts, and she'll also be able to give you a report of what percentage of your current district, of the proposed current district, and these are for you to be looking at, not us, but of your proposed current district is in your prior district. And I think given this map that I'm seeing, and I can't remember which, you know, where 6 is off the top of my head, so I apologize. Can you show me the current map, the southeast? Yeah, I think a large, and now can you show me the southeast of Josina's map? Yeah, L8 is I assume L8 is where you live.
I'm not sure.
Okay, and we're all going to find that out, but I'm pretty sure that's where you live, given what we're seeing. And I think we'll be able to give you, for the next meeting, core of the district, or even maybe before, to show you that L8 is in essence, probably a large percentage of that is current District 6. And we'll be able to do that for all of these districts. And I think that will be helpful besides just a map overlaying the new and old boundary. But I think it'll also show you that most of your population is probably still in that district. Now we need to double check that, but those are the kinds of information we can provide you that will help you make a decision.
I'm not sure on that map. I think I know where the river is at, but I'm not sure where the river nor the tollway is at on that map.
Tollway, I think, is about the top of LA, if I'm not mistaken. But
can you scroll down?
Yeah, that's the extent of the map. That's the top of it.
Yeah, that's LA. Yeah, right there. It's right at the top.
Assuming the white area is a river?
The white area, I am pretty sure, is the river just by looking at these. Yeah.
Okay. This is Route 31. Route 31.
Okay, now I see 88.
Yeah,
okay.
And 88. Right. So this is the 31 and 88 intersection or interchange. And moving south. Yep, I believe this road crossing is, what is that? That's Illinois. Illinois. Somewhere in there. Might be Indian Trail, or yeah.
The next bridge over.
I wouldn't guess. It's, we can get the detail.
He'll get it to us.
Mm-hmm. Does that help you, Ron?
It's starting to.
Okay.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
So I think one of the things that we can do, and Josina, we can work with her with regards to this, is getting like a poster size PDF that we could print and produce with the street names on it of each of those L proposed or draft districts. Then you could see the street names down to the street.
Perfect.
And we can certainly do that with Josina's help.
That
would be helpful.
That'd be very helpful.
Absolutely. We'll have those ready.
All right.
And Josina, you can do a core district report on all these, correct? Once we put a comparison of a thing.
Yeah, that's no problem. I'll do them for each district.
All right. Are there any other questions?
No.
No? Yes, Mr. Schulke.
Yeah, I just want to throw in a political, historical perspective here. Number one, I've been in office now in Kane County for 40 years as of last week. So I've seen a lot of different maneuvers done over the years. And I want to say that what I've experienced with this group has been one of the more positive things I've seen in Kane County as far as trying to draw fair maps that are understandable, mayors that seemingly treat everybody the same. And I'll say this jokingly, this hasn't always been the case. Case in point, for a number of years, this room was dominated by a county board chairman from my community named Philip B. Elstrom. And Mr. Elstrom was quite well known for his advanced thinking, I would describe it. He was a friend of mine. I'm not trying to downplay him at all. But he was pretty bold in his pronouncements. And I think he gets the credit for the Cougar Stadium. He gets the credit for the bicycle trails. He probably gets the credit for buying this building that we're in right now. But one of the things he did have that didn't pan out for him was he wanted to site a 1,000-acre landfill in western Kane County. Well, that one just kind of crashed and burned him. And, you know, good people ran for the board in opposition to that, and they've served well. So, I mean, it's kind of a moment in the past. But I remember as things kind of emerged in Kane County, Phil decided that he was too much of a problem in the face of the county board. So he made the decision he was going to step out as chairman and allow Frank Miller from Aurora to become the chairman. And he was going to assume the chairmanship of the Kane County Forest Preserve, which he did. And with great zealousness, he went out and bought all kinds of land. I will say that, and probably were enriched today because of his actions. But one of the things that began to emerge, according to Phil, that there was a movement on the county board that they thought it was time for him to retire. And they couldn't figure out a way to get him the message other than to draw a map of county board seats, which basically Phil's political power was Batavia. So they took a map and drew a map and basically divided Batavia at least into 2, maybe 3 districts, so that there was no strong part of it. Half of Batavia at the north end was in a Geneva district, and the other half is in a North Aurora district. And I don't know, Drew, you may have had some Batavia in your area. So anyway, there were 3 different districts, and it was a joke. Kind of Elstrom kind of laughed at it at the end, but the classic of all stories is that Elstrom owned a building on North River Street in downtown Batavia, and one of his tenants was then Speaker of the House, J. Dennis Hastert. So I used to go over there on occasion, and Phil used to have a patio up above his house up there that he'd sit on, and every now and then Hastert would come up there, and I would just sit there and marvel at the political wisdom, or not, I don't know if it was wisdom, but insights that I was being shared with. And one of the things that was coming up, and I think this was about this time in 1990, they were getting ready to redraw the maps. And I don't know if this is when we kind of divided Batavia up or not, but it was on its way to happen. But J. Dennis Hastert was sitting there, and J. Dennis Hastert, I don't think was yet Speaker of the House, but he was, apparently it was in rumor he was going to be. So one of the things he wanted is he wanted to be in a district that included Dixon, Illinois, which was the home of Ronald Reagan, because Reagan was leaving the presidency. So the congressional district, or whatever number it was, started on the east side of Batavia at Fermilab, went down onto 88th corridor, and went all the way west into Illinois to Rock Falls and Sterling. And
almost to the river.
Oh yeah, and it was the oddest looking district you ever wanted to see. But J. Dennis and Phil would sit there and just get great laughs off of it. He says, well, this map drawing is the end of political careers. And so I just share this. I think what you're doing here is fine. I appreciate what you're trying to do, but there's been some history here where this hasn't always been the case. We've drawn some strange maps in Kane County over the years, and there's always some story of wonder behind them. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for that wonderful bit of history. I hope that when we get done, that none of the members of our public will say this is done behind closed doors. Because everything that is drawn by Phil and Justina is going to be brought forward to you for your consideration. There's not going to be any fait accompli, and this is the way it's done. And I hope that you will enjoy this process and we'll get your input. So as we go through, it truly is a fair map. And that is truly my goal. And I think it's all of our goals to be able to do this. Mr. Martin.
Just to one point that Jeff raised, it is peculiar. I mean, my district has 80% of Geneva, about 20% of Batavia. It's got an odd shape that goes west of Batavia out to Deer Path Road. The population is all there. The numbers are there. It's District 11.
Oh, okay.
It would be nice in the context of those of us who live in areas that are basically landlocked, which is all the stuff along the river, if somehow we could begin to jiggle things a little bit so that we're more coterminous with the towns that are the majority of the population in our district. And I don't know how you do that, to be real candid, because numbers are numbers and you've got to squeeze everybody in. But you know, to the degree we could represent the communities that are the majority of our population, it just would seem to make sense.
You live in Batavia or Geneva?
Geneva.
Oh.
And I do believe that that's one of the goals of drawing a fair map. And Phil, you can
yeah,
talk about this.
And was that Mr. Martin? I apologize. I said that, or who mentioned that, but I agree with you that to the extent one of the goals is communities of interest, and I personally think that cities are a community of interest. And as we go past, this was just kind of the first. Obviously, Aurora cannot be in one district or even 3 or 4, right? Especially when you add the Latino issues. But to the extent we can keep the cores of those towns together, some you can't because of population. And I don't know how big Geneva is off the top of my head. But, you know, you have a district size of approximately 22,000. To the extent we can keep the core keep those cities together and not mess with other redistricting principles, I think that is a goal that we're trying to shoot for as we go forward here, especially hearing that from the board. And it's a goal I think I've heard often from boards in the past. Hey, let's not try and split a town up to the extent we don't have to. Now, there are times you have to, right? The town's too big, or it's got the map just doesn't fit other ways. But I think as Josina goes forward and we go forward, I think that's something important to keep in mind. And if you see a map that from us that says, hey guys, why the heck can we split in this town 3 ways? That's a question you should ask. And it's something we may not be thinking about as we work through it. But you know what? If we don't have that answer because, Aurora is an obvious one, right? You have to. But if we can't provide that answer, then you should be challenging us to go back and look at that and see if we can do it better for you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Hernandez?
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, a little louder, please.
Oh, okay. I had a question. I just wanted to see if Josina could provide a little more detailed version of the Latino districts that include like the overlays.
Yeah, that was requested previously, so I'll be providing that for each individual district.
So it'll be for every individual district, but it'll be like an overall, right?
I can provide a countywide zoomed out map, but what I think was being requested was zoomed in versions on each individual district that was drawn. So I'm happy to provide both.
The fear I have for you, Ms. Hernandez, is that you're gonna lose we can give it to you. The lines get pretty hard the further out we do it. It's a lot more efficient. It's a lot easier for you to see specifics in the upfront version, especially if we're providing you old versus new. But so I just want to let you know that may be the easier way, and we'll try both. But we don't want to provide you something that doesn't give you much detail that you can't really read.
Madam Chairman?
And just to clarify, this is for the L1 through L8 districts that we're going to be overlaying over the existing districts, which are in that region.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Is that all right, Ms. Hernandez?
Yes, thank you, Ms. Chairman.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, Bates here.
Yes, Ms. Bates.
So I can't tell which district I'm in because I can't tell the street names. Will we be getting something with more street names on the map?
Yes, that will be happening. That clarity will occur.
Thank you.
Mr. Ford.
I'm sorry, make sure. Again, what was the population number that we was targeting for the individual districts?
22. Was what, 20?
The bottom footnote is 22,141. That's the ideal.
And then the variation from that is what we talked about.
The total variation at the end of the process has got to be for lack of a better word, plus or minus 5%. That can be +6, -4, +7, -3, but a 10% from greatest to smallest. And what we've provided here, at least beginning, is nothing greater than 3%, just to kind of give you a start. If we end up drawing with the ACS information, we're probably going to try and get that deviation to plus or minus 1%. Because of the fact that the ACS data we have obviously concerns about the accuracy on a total population issue.
And I was on a meeting today with the other county chairs, and many of them are looking at 1 to 0% deviation. So they're holding it very tight using the same kind of data.
So then our total county population number that we're looking at again is what then?
Well, the total number of residents in
Yes.
Kane County, was it 534,000 something?
Yeah. Josina, do you have the total population based on the data you were using for ACS?
Well, I can tell you it's approximately 531,384.
531,384. Okay.
I mean, that might be off. That's less than 20 off one way or the other, but just doing the math, the 24 times the ideal.
Okay.
Mr. Shepro.
I was under the impression that the Census Bureau had reported the final statewide total.
It's state total for the purposes of federal.
Okay, but not any county totals.
We don't have county or block. Yeah. We do not have the census tract and block data.
In August.
It doesn't provide any demographic information. It's just a total population number.
September, yes, sir.
For the congressional.
Yeah, the congressional is September 15th.
Just for the record, everybody will see, we've kind of talked about this, I think, at the full board. The entire data set that we use to draw is scheduled to be released on or before August 16th. You've heard September 30th. You've heard September 30th a lot. That's in a tabulated format for the public to use, but the actual data, which is what we need to draw and we'll convert into the system, will be available approximately August 16th.
That's 1/6.
Madam Chairman, this is Alan.
Yes, Ms. Allen.
Is the goal here to get the districts between 0 and 1% using this data that we're not sure about, so that when we get the accurate data, we can tweak a little bit and try and stay as close as we can, maybe 2 to 3%?
If we're forced to draw, this is Phil, if we're forced to draw with the ACS data, the goal is to get that deviation as small as possible so that we have the greatest chance of being within that plus or minus 5% deviation. That's the goal. If we're not, and we're forced to draw with ACS data, we will then be looking about talking to you about tweaking the map.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Shepro.
Phil, earlier two questions, I guess it's for everybody. Has there a draft map been prepared that includes all the districts or only the proposed Hispanic districts? At this point,
Mr. Shepro, only the proposed Hispanic districts. Those were finished about 48 hours ago. So we focused on that. I would leave it to Josina how long, if this looks how long it'll take for the rest, but I think the rest will actually be much simpler. So we haven't gotten to that yet. We focused on that to get you something to look at, something to chew on, for lack of a better word, and then drawing the rest.
Phil, you had referred earlier, I think it was when the question of the pairing, the pairing of incumbents came up, and you referred to your marching orders. And I guess my question is, what do you perceive are your marching orders, and from whom did they come?
You know what, and maybe marching orders is maybe my perception, but I can't remember. Honestly, I thought the only marching orders I've received are kind of what I've said to the county board and somewhat to this task force that appears to have been, a lack of a better word, consensus. Does that make sense? I know I had mentioned to at least to the county board that one of our goals was to be drawing to make sure we were not pairing incumbents to the extent possible. Other than that, most of the marching orders are, in my mind, what I would call the traditional redistricting principles. Compact, contiguous, equal population, and protecting and not violating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And then other things such as communities of interest. And I personally believe that communities of interest include towns to the extent you can. So marching orders may have been too strong a word, but that's kind of where I got that from, sir.
And if memory serves, when that question was asked with a consensus, it was never actually brought to a consensus. It was assumed that you all wanted to remain in your current districts. So that was an assumption. If you'd like to bring that to a formal consensus, we can do so. But I truly believe that every board member wants to remain within their district and not to have two people paired together.
I would say yes.
My question was really intended broader than that subject, because I think when that question was posed, whether there was a quote consensus, I don't think anybody disagreed with what Phil had presented.
Yeah, I use the word consensus a little differently than you do. Having sat through the last board, something about, you know, some of the consensus that are votes on here that are, that's not how I have in the past used the word consensus. So I apologize if I used the more colloquial than what you guys do as a board.
If there are no other questions, let's go on to our town halls.
I have another.
Oh, yes, Mr.
Yeah.
Sheffner.
Josina, you had identified the three, I think, that you had focused on, which was the population plus or minus 5%, compact and contiguous, and Voting Rights Act Section 2. And I think you said you had worked on the state map 10 years ago. Was that the state legislative map or the congressional map, or both?
Primarily the state legislative map.
Thank you.
Right, no other questions. Let's go to town halls. Could you please pull up before we begin the questions?
Sure, I can do that.
And then I will turn it over to Mr. Ramirez, and he can talk about his work on the town halls.
Okay.
Here we go. Thank you. I asked all of you to, and it's not too late, but I wanted to get feedback from this task force, from your community, of questions that you may have been able to ask your constituents about redistricting. So I did some judicial editing, but trying to keep it as pure as possible to the intent of what you said. And what you've done. Sometimes, as you see with Ms. Strathman, I couldn't unpack that, if I can use that word, because it was pretty interesting read. But basically there's an attention to diversity. So I believe that is an accurate assumption. So again, any of your board members, since we're going to be starting the town halls, or the community members of the task force, if you'd like to submit questions, please do so, and we'll add those to that. What the purpose of this is going to be is you're going to see we're doing a poll to the people who are attending these town halls, and we're going to use these questions as part of that polling. So I know that there was concerns about where these questions are coming from. They're coming from you. So your input is vital to the polling samples that the questions we're going to be asking during the poll, and any questions that we ask our audience. So it's organically coming from the reapportionment task force. So that is the purpose of that. So for those of you who have been able to support that, I thank you, and please, we've got until tomorrow. And if you can get those questions to me by tomorrow, we'll put that on this document, and we'll continue that process, and they'll be incorporated. So I kind of like, we can go back and let's just do a quick highlight so everybody can see. We'll just do a quick overview. Wanting an accurate count, we have attention to diversity. What is the process of being used to redraw the maps? Is politics kept out of the process? How does redistricting affect me? Why should I be worried about redistricting? Are 24 districts the best number for the county board, and why? Draw lines that are as compact and continuous as possible, taking into account using pre-existing political subdivisions lines, especially townships, villages, and school districts, that we just addressed. Very good. The most preeminent characteristic of community in regards to drawing election districts should be a geography, living in a particular place, and generally those places, along with the interests of the citizens, are determined by the pre-existing political subdivisions with which the identity and where they have chosen to live. So that's very, very important. I think they're very similar. Is that it, page 2? That's it?
That's all.
So that's all we have. So please, if you have any more, I'd love to get them. Mr. Shepro? There's Brenda. We have several more. My apologies, if I may, just quickly. How do we know what the numbers are if we do not have the exact census? And why don't we have a deadline? And why do we have a deadline? And how can the county ensure equal representation and transparency throughout the process besides just town halls? And then that all people in the county are represented fairly and having better access to county board members either by email or phone. So, yes, Mr. Shepro.
I'm having trouble visualizing how these questions are going to be translated into a poll. I mean, are they going to be saying, do you favor diversity? Yes or no? Do you favor fair? I mean, I'm not sure.
If we can take your liberty, we're going to answer that in just a few minutes. We're going to give you a sample of how that polling is going to be done.
And are we also going to get a sense of what the format is for conducting the hearing itself? Is there an agenda? What kind of presentation are they going to see? I note that the press release says that these are your forums, not the task force forums.
I have that if you want to see it.
If we may, they're coming forward.
Okay.
And all those will be addressed. And any questions that you may have as we put forward the agenda, obviously can be amended. So, Franklin, do you want to introduce yourself, please?
Well, thank you very much. My name is Franklin Ramirez. I know most of you, but for those of you, I've lived in Kane County since 2012. Formerly, I'm the Elgin Township Supervisor and have a passion for information and education. So I was very honored to be asked to help facilitate this by Madam Chair. And I'm glad you asked your questions, Mr. Shepro, because that's exactly what we're here to answer. And given the next couple minutes, we'll do that. I was tasked with trying to locate and secure 4 locations throughout the county. And we collectively have decided that those locations are what's in front of you at the moment. And that being that we're still in light of COVID, we wanted to give an opportunity for those who do not feel as though that they want to come in person, an option via Zoom. So you'll see on Wednesday, June 2nd, we will have that Zoom town hall or online town hall. We chose the time of 6 p.m. with the exception of the Prisco Center in Aurora, our first one for 6:30 due to some scheduling conflicts. But this allows for the maximum number of people to attend. They're about an hour to an hour and a half in length. Then we'll have the agenda. I know you had asked about that. This is right now, the draft agenda of what we're looking for. Welcome and introductions from the Madam Chairman and those who are present. The overview of what's happening and why we're doing it. Soon we'll get into a thing called Poll Everywhere. That's the question and answers part. Then we'll go into the bulk of our town hall, was just public comments. And then we'll end it up with next steps. When are the next town halls, when they could be made available, and closing remarks. So in public comments, it's just simply that. Think of yourself at your board meeting. Instead of 15 minutes of public comments, it's going to be more of an hour, hour and a half of, slightly under hour and a half of public comments. There's a one-way direction. They're going to tell us how they feel about redistricting, what they want to see accomplished. And all of that information is going to be gathered and given to the task force. If we want to go towards the next one, Poll Everywhere.
That now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Just give us 1 second here. We're going to shift gears.
Sure, I'll tell you. So Poll Everywhere, if you go to pollev.com, you can get a little more sense. It's an interactive tool that participants can use for immediate polling. So for those individuals that are present and that want to anonymously sit there and answer these questions, we've come up with a little survey. It's actually live right now. So if you wanted to participate, you're more than welcome to, just for a sense of demonstration. You would go to pollev.com/Kane County. And that was, for those of you on Zoom, it's super easy. Just put that into your web browser. And as you participate through the survey, your answers will appear instantaneously. So if anybody wanted to give it a whirl, you're more than welcome to. But this, I think, keeps the audience engaged and, in my opinion, gives them a little bit more to say, okay, this is what the task force is asking of us, the public, and then they can shape their public comment around it if need be. Public comment will be about 5 minutes long for both citizens and agencies. And if any agency wanted to put their formal comments in writing, they could submit them and they will be presented on the website.
And as, just to clarify, this is a sample. This is not the actual questions that we're going to be asking.
I'll answer them.
Yeah.
When do you expect to have the actual questions?
Well, I wanted to receive all of your questions first.
Yeah, I'll answer.
Somebody's doing it. There. I'll launch a browser real quick to show you what it looks like. Let me see if I can get it going here. Poll.
And this is a great opportunity. Again, the questions that we're asking of you are questions for those giving public comment. So not that I like or dislike a particular question, but for instance, the number of board seats in the future, do you want more or less than, the current 24? That's a question that I think that would be the kind of question to ask individuals. Yes or no questions are great. Here you have a ranking question. And so they can easily sit there and say, out of these choices, this is how I would see 1, 2, 3, and 4. Open-ended questions, like there is an open-ended question at the end for final comments that they want to submit. But really, these are just snapshots of what you want to gain from the public.
Do I take it then that it is your intention to have the board revisit its vote on the size of the board?
Oh, no, not at all. Not at all. There was that question that was asked by Mr. Walters, and we can include that because he says here very clearly, our 24 districts the best number for Kane County. So that replicates that question. So I do not wish for you to revisit it. It has already been done. The resolution has been signed and passed. It's fait accompli.
Yeah, I was just pointing out that that question is a great example of what you would ask the residents, because these town halls are an opportunity for us to ask questions of the residents through this poll, and more or less for residents to tell the task force and the county how they feel about redistricting.
And as we mentioned, this is a sample. As of tomorrow, this document will be done with your questions, and we can go through them, and some of them are duplicates, but we'll make sure that these questions are responded to on this polling. Mr. Martin.
I can perceive a value to town halls in the context of providing information to people and answering questions that they might have relative to the process or the fairness of the process or whether politics are involved and that type of thing. But our obligations here are fairly rigid. I mean, we have to follow the law. We have to do what's correct. And my viewpoint of having a poll filled out is that if I'm going to respond to that poll, I might have some belief that the body that I'm talking to might respond to it. And we don't have a lot of latitude to respond. We have latitude to do what we're instructed to do. So maybe I'm overcooking it, which I always accuse everybody else of doing. So I'll apologize in advance, but it's not really an open forum of give us some help and tell us what we're going to do. We've got some pretty strict marching orders here. You know, I don't want to repeat them, but we have a prescription we have to follow. And one of them is we have to pick the size of the board, and we've done that. And I'm just picking on that because that's one of the statutory obligations that we can check off now and say we've done. I just don't. I don't want to create. I don't want to create expectations or run the risk of creating expectations when we really are all bound to do what we're doing anyway.
One of the obligations that this task force does have is to have a public meeting before the final map is drawn, to get fair input on that public before the board votes on it, the board, not the task force. The task force makes recommendation, then there's a public forum, and then it's brought to the board for vote.
Right, these town halls are not that.
This is in addition to, we went one more step. Because it has been said, and I think one of the questions from Ms. Hernandez was brought forward, is trust of government. Input from government, open, making sure it's open and that people are fully understanding of the process we're going through. So why I agree with you, but we are, in my opinion, we need to reach out to the community to ask for their thoughts, their considerations, which may actually confirm the considerations of this task force.
Okay.
Madam Chairman, this is Alan.
Oh, hold on just a second, please.
Sure.
I just want to suggest, I'll bring up some old political history again of Kane County as something that happened last time. After we did the census account in 2010, the city of Batavia lost 361 people out of our final count. And what had been determined was—
North Aurora.
No, Geneva. And what it had been determined is that all the people in the Kane County Jail, then on Fabian Parkway, were credited to the city of Batavia. And apparently this was done because if you pulled into the Settlers Hills landfill, and I went up and took pictures of this, as your garbage trucks went up the hill, there was a sign there that said, "Welcome to Settlers Hills landfill, Batavia, Illinois." Now, I was told that that was some kind of a Phil Elstrom reaction or something, that he was the one that put it there, so somebody in Geneva didn't want to have credit for it. But at the end of the day, the Kane County Jail was on the Geneva side of Fabian Parkway, and rightfully the inmates there, the count of them belonged to the city of Geneva, but it had been credited to Batavia. So we had to go through a little bit of rigmarole, agreeing to readjust our numbers and everything else. So I guess as we have these hearings, one thing I would encourage us to do is have a map of the area where that hearing is, so everybody can see exactly who's getting counted within this jurisdiction, because that was a problem last time in Kane County. It was a bit of an embarrassing situation, and as I remember, we kind of swept it under the rug a little bit, so we didn't want too many people to know we had done this. But, you know, and I didn't make a big noise about it in Batavia, but we did give up 361 inmates in the county jail to Geneva, which they properly belong to. But initially, in the published census, we had them in Batavia.
Okay. Thank you. Who else was online speaking? Deb?
Thanks, Madam Chairman. These are such great anecdotes. What I wanted to follow up Mr. Martin's comments was, I think there's a difference between saying to people, is it important to you that your county board district includes the things that are important to you, your town, your school, that the things that representative is concerned about are the same items that you are concerned about. And I think that kind of consistency and transparency would be useful to the people who come to these things to feel that those concerns of theirs are being heard. Like Ms. Strathman said, she had people who felt that they were not being listened to. And what we want to do here is listen. So when you ask questions like, should the Longmeadow Quarter tollway have a sunset clause? Should there be this many number of county board seats? Should we cite landfills in Kane County? Those are questions that need a lot of background. They need some history. They need sometimes financial connectivity. So I would try and make a difference in the town hall questions between the ones that need study and the ones that are saying to people, what's important to you in your life, and being able to reach your county board representative when you want to talk to them about something. Is that articulate enough?
I think that's wonderful. I think that's very, very well said. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions on this?
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Ford.
Yes. So at these town hall meetings, is this, I don't know what you want to call it, the proposed map? Are the two sections going to be presented there? Or we're just going to have a series of map, or what's the rest of the presentation as far as maps?
I will let Roger speak to
Sure.
that.
So right now, the only map that we have is the current board district map, and it displays the population from 2011. That's what was officially adopted by the board. That'll be presented. We can show the current district map with the ACS data that we have in the map. I think that's probably the extent, because right now in the process of doing this, you're still in that review and analysis. You have not adopted a recommendation. And I had mentioned before that recommendations would come in from different things, whether they're town hall, they're Phil and Josina, working on demographer and legal and the Voting Rights Act. All of those come in, and then you have the responsibility to look at those and accept them, reject them, modify them, and then ultimately those recommendations go forward. But I think that we're still at that stage where we're reviewing and doing analysis. And one of the things that was mentioned earlier, I think, was getting at, did the original Voting Rights Act districts, or I guess original is not the right word, but the ones that were displayed today, how did those impact or affect the surrounding districts? And I think what Josina was saying is, we didn't go and take some from one district and put it in there. We drew these kind of a green field, open-ended, draw the districts based on what the population represents. So when you're looking at the adjacent districts, that's kind of the next step in the process. So, you don't really have, other than the 8 districts that were, shown, there's not like this repercussion or a fallout kind of steps that have been done subsequently, because we were just trying to get an understanding of the Voting Rights Act districts. So I think some of the overlay that maybe we're looking for in the next version we can provide, you know, some overlay of the existing districts with maybe an outline of the proposed districts with streets. That might help. So, but I believe these maps that we have will be the ones that they'll be seeing.
Because these are our maps.
Okay.
I pointed to the one that has the population on it, the current population. Because that is our map. And Mr. Fonseca was absolutely correct that the presentation today is a work in progress. And we don't want to present that to the public to share that with them yet because it's not the approved upon map by the task force.
Okay. If I can add one more thing, one of the things that we were looking for in the questions, which I don't know that
Although, excuse me, if I may, it has been opened up to the public because this is a public meeting.
Sure. Yeah, in looking at the questions, it is difficult to craft questions and wordsmith, you know, to get them to where they're not these open-ended, you know, and kind of random. So we're working on that. These were pretty raw, the questions, and I think summarizing them the way Madam Chairman did helps, but we're going to be working on that in the next couple days, trying to get questions where you can, you know, have a response, and it's just trying to get some idea where they're at in their thought process. And then also, Franklin had mentioned that these questions can also be, you know, something that helps them get their mind thinking about what types of things they might want to say or comments that, you know, they might want to formulate. But it's going to be more about listening and letting them have their public's comment to record it. And I believe we'll have a recording of it, and we're also going to take minutes of the meeting so that everybody will get effectively a transcript of it.
Yes, Mr. Martin.
Are we going to have expertise attending these town halls so that if people ask questions bearing upon statutes and what have you, that we have legal opinion present to give them what at least I couldn't give them if they asked me the questions to articulate these points? We've hired specialists to help us through this process.
You want me to answer?
Yes.
I can try to respond to that. So usually in these public comments, we're taking their questions and bringing them back to legal counsel. So we could get some contact information from them, but we would be fielding the question.
Okay, as long as that's clearly instructed.
Yeah,
I don't want to put us in a trick bag.
No, we wouldn't be responding. And I think that's the only appropriate response we could have is we will field your question. This is public comment. We'll take your comments, your questions. We bring them back. Yeah. We'd synthesize those into a document, bring them in here. You folks could have those, and you'll have your legal counsel. You'll have the people to help you.
All right.
And you may decide you need to respond, or you may, you know, decide that's just a point made. And
just want to be able to give the answer that we're not here to answer this question. We have attorneys to do it. So we're not.
Wisdom.
Roger, this is Zach Kautsky, and to the member asking that question, I just wanted to say that, you know, based on, you know, attending multiple others of these, both in counties and in the state, you know, over the last couple months here, these really, when done best, are to gather and offer a platform for the community to give input. So I think, you know, just kind of at the outset, as the agenda is set here, educational overview, why we're meeting with you, and then just kind of an open question. There's some moderation that can be done, but really this is an opportunity by community to just let others provide feedback to the county. And that's been standardized both at the local and state level, and I think in a pretty effective way over the last couple months.
Chair?
Yes, Mr. Osmond.
How are we going to get this information out about the town halls and where they are? How will we let our people know?
It's an excellent question.
Mike, please. I couldn't hear the question.
I'm sorry.
My
question was, how will we let the population know the dates and the times and the places of these town hall meetings so that we can get them engaged and involved?
Thank you.
Mr. Ramirez?
Sure. Through the help of Madam Chairman's office, this press release that you see in front of you has been sent out to a number of news outlets. Sorry, one of which you've seen, the Daily Herald, have already sit there and reported on this. And so not only is it through the news outlets, but also through social media, through Facebook. Right now, I believe about 1,500 people just yesterday were reached in terms of, and that's just organic, through Facebook. And so through individuals, through community pages, through social groups, asking for them to sit there and repeat it as well.
And I did Patch, if everyone is familiar with Patch, which is a micro news network by a community. It's going out on Patch as well. And to my delight, I've received a Patch notification about this right before the meeting.
Okay.
Excellent.
Yeah. So if, with the Facebook page, is it on the Kane County Facebook page?
If it's not already, it will be soon.
So once that's done, we will let the task force know. And if you have Facebook, you can like the page and you can send it out to your network as well. I am going to be talking about it today at 7:30. I have a meeting. I think Mr. Schelke, Mayor Schelke, is part of that with the League of Women Voters. And they just asked me late last night if I would speak at 5 minutes about this.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Yeah, Nikki here. How about Kane Connects? We have a really wonderful following, a lot of people reading Kane Connects. That would be a good way to get the word out as well.
Yeah, and through that initial press release, it did go to Kane County Connects, and
Okay.
I do believe they have a posting on it as well.
All right.
We have at least two, this is Kenyon, we have at least two radio stations in this county, one in Aurora and one in Elgin. And they have a little following of people that vote, and would be important. It'd be easy to get it on there. You could,
absolutely.
You could probably even go on the radio.
Or you can.
I can't, I'm going to meetings all the time.
We'll pre-record you. But we'll check on that tomorrow. Thank you for that. Excellent idea. Mr. Shep?
I'm just very skeptical that these are going to do anything other than make people think that they're having input where they aren't going to even really understand what's being done. I can't even think of how many meetings we have had with the board with detailed handouts and presentations. Probably if you added it all together, it's probably over eight hours of material. And yet, as I understand the format for these hearings, they are not going to be shown a proposed map to comment on, which is, I think, the intent of the redistricting statute, is that they have a chance to comment on an actual complete redistricting map. And we've wrestled with a lot of these concepts about the Voting Rights Act and compact and contiguous. And of course, that we've been told that compact and contiguous really doesn't mean compact and contiguous. It gets thrown out if we choose to do so. And all you have to do is look at some of the maps that have been drawn statewide, and you see that that doesn't seem to matter. It just seems to me that these are asking people for opinions on information that they are not going to remotely be able to digest in the format that's being considered. So I think the hearings are premature until we have something to actually communicate to them. A lot of the discussion here seems to be kind of a chicken and egg. We can't do anything till we get the public input, but the public can't really give us input until they know what it is that's being proposed to them. So I just, and the idea of polling on these things. Again, if in order for people to respond intelligently to a poll, they need information. And I don't see how this format in the time allotted is remotely going to be able to give them that information.
I think it's important that the community, our constituents are reached out to the best ability that we have. There is going to be, after the map is drawn, and that is the final map that is agreed upon by this task force, we will have a public meeting that will then be asked and shared with the people who have joined the town hall, so that people who have been engaged will have the opportunity to come and view and see the final map. So it is a one-step outreach that we are doing that's independent of what is required by the state statute. So anytime I believe that we can engage voters on a matter is critically important for the governance of the county. So I think we should give it a try without negating its opportunity. And let's see what we can get, because there may be some insightful information that may come forward.
No, I agree. I think that's a good idea, reaching out, even if you don't have the complete map. Just the process of making the map and listening to what people have to say about a map, I think that's all good. And you'll get comments from people, what they feel what should be included in the map, just like we all have our understanding of a map. So I think reaching out to the public in those town hall meetings is a great idea. I'm all for it. I think it's open, it's good governance.
All right, it's slightly after 5 o'clock. Are there any other questions?
Is it time for me, Madam Chairman?
It is, sir.
I would move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
I like your
Abstain.
comments. They were really great.
Have a good evening.